I'm your host, Jaye Poole, and this is Potstirrer Podcast. Last year, I interviewed Allison K. Garcia, author of the highly rated novel Vivir el Dream. When we talked last time, Allison shared a great deal about the novel and the myriad of experiences and influences that inform her writing. We also talked about the subject of undocumented immigration, which is a major theme in the book. Check out episode 14 if you haven't already. Well, today, Allison is back to talk about her upcoming novel, Finding Amor, as well as the themes that inform her new book. Guys, you're in for a real treat. Here's today's interview with Allison K. Garcia, author of the upcoming novel, Finding Amor. Welcome back, Allison.
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm really excited to be here again today.
Last time you were here, we were talking about your book, Vivir el Dream, which is a very insightful novel about a young college student who is an undocumented immigrant and her mother living in the U.S. and their experiences. Since then, you've been working on a new book that's coming out soon. It's a novel I'm very much looking forward to. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's the first book of a 3-part series. It's called Finding Amor. The series name is Buscando Home, which is buscando in Spanish is the word for looking for or searching for. And the book is about a Salvadoran family that's been kind of separated by time and distance. And it talks a lot about love, not like romantic love as much as the love of family, the love of God, and loving yourself. And so some of the themes are domestic violence, abuse, and then, again, the topic of immigration. The main character, there's 3 main characters, or 4 main characters. The main character, Emmanuel, is an 8-year-old boy who comes across the borders to the United States to be with his mom, who he hasn't really met. He met her when he was an infant, but then she left him to come to the U.S. to make a better life for them, and just as her mother had left her. And so it's kind of a cycle, a family cycle that's kind of started there. And so he comes to the U.S. and he's apprehended at the border by the La Migra, or ICE, and is thrown into like a detention center or immigration center. And so that's one of the main beginning parts of the book. So that's kind of some of what the book deals with.
Okay. So how has the experience been writing Finding Amor compared to writing your previous novel?
Well, with Finding Amor, I actually wrote it back in 2014 before all the stuff was going on currently with detention centers and the children in cages and them losing the children and everything like that. So that's all been going on since I've been editing it. But when I wrote it in 2014, I was inspired because I had seen, I guess more, I don't know if inspired is the great word, but like just upset or like I was just very almost disgusted or upset by this image I saw on the news of these children from El Salvador who were, like, you could tell they were like little kids mostly, some teenagers, and they were on like a bus and Americans were outside protesting them. They had been apprehended and were on their way to like a detention center, and Americans were outside like yelling at them and like, you know, and like just the anger and hatred on their faces of the Americans was so upsetting to me, especially since I'm sure like some of those people were probably like spouting Christian values, which is something that makes me so physically angry to have that be happening. And so just that image was like stuck in my mind, and that's kind of one of the things that's the first image of the book is the Emmanuel sitting on a bus and having all these Americans kind of screaming hate at him. And so that's, you know, I took that feeling and that's what I put into the book. And so when I first wrote it, I had kind of some other ideas about the ending and how I wanted it to go. And then I think because of that, it didn't really sit well with me. And so I never ended up editing it until just this year. And I was like, well, I wrote a book in Latino Christian fiction, and I should write another book in Latino Christian fiction. And I was kind of going back and forth. And I was like, well, I've got this one, and I think it's good. So I picked it up in January, and I was like, this is horrible. I don't like this at all. and I almost threw it in the garbage. Like, metaphorically, because it was on my computer. But, like, if it was in paper, I'm glad it wasn't on paper, because I might have actually thrown it in the garbage. I just, like, in the beginning was fine, but the ending just was, and I felt like there were insurmountable errors that I couldn't overcome at the end, and so I felt very, just disappointed and discouraged, and I called my editor. I think I was just send her, like, Facebook messages. That's usually how we communicate. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this project. I feel like there's insurmountable errors, blah, 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 that just can't be fixed. And so she, in her infinite wisdom, said, well, a lot of things that seem unsurmountable at first, once you sit back and kind of take some time away from them, can seem surmountable. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then it always takes me till the last minute to think about this, but then I was like, well, maybe I should pray about it. Allison, she thought about that like 3 weeks ago. And so I decided to pray about it, and as I was praying about it, whether I should leave that project or leave the genre in general, because I was starting to think, like, with all of the racism and everything in the area, I was like, I don't even know if I should be a white person writing this book. And so I was starting to really question if that was what God wanted for me. And so I prayed about it, and instead of feeling like I should leave the book, God actually gave me an idea to fix the ending and then to make it into a series. So as I always think that God knows better than I do, I decided to keep going with it, and I actually really love my book now, and I think people are really going to like it. And I think also just like God's timing is amazing, just like how I had written Vivir el Dream in 2012, and none of the DACA stuff was going on when it came out. All the DACA stuff came out right when Vivir el Dream came out. And then with Finding Amor, I'm in the middle of editing it. I'm almost done. And then all the stuff kind of starts going down with the kids that are missing and the being caged at the border. And I think it made it's like God was like, this book needs to come out because, like, I think, as you probably know, like, there's a lot of people that are Christians that are coming out and saying all the stuff about, it's like they're not that upset about children being caged. And I think that this book needs to be out there so that people can, especially Christians, can get a different perspective and understanding and get into someone else's shoes and kind of walk around for a little bit and realize why these things are going on, and, that we need to have compassion and love and not walls and hatred and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go back to something that you had mentioned before, that it sounds like one of the challenges was that you were, you're coming from being someone who's Caucasian, writing about the experiences of people from Latin America. And so I imagine that would be somewhat of a challenge, especially since it's not something that maybe you personally experienced. How are you able to kind of deal with that as far as meet that challenge, and how are you able to incorporate maybe the actual experiences that maybe you hadn't personally experienced, but there are people out there that have had those experiences? Yeah,
for me, it's been a process. It's something that I've been really thinking about a lot. This isn't something that I'm taking lightly, because right now the situation with race and immigration in this country is very serious and very scary and life-threatening. And so I don't want to be contributing to systemic racism. At the same time, I'm kind of inherently kind of part of it because of my color, being white. for me, I want to be as aware as I can of what I'm doing as a person, as a white person, contribute to racism, and I definitely don't want to be a part of that. So that's one of the things that really stopped me. So I've been on a kind of a personal journey of going to some seminars and workshops and reading a lot of books about that topic so that I can be more aware of my impact. I'm just going to throw out a couple titles of books. There's a really good book called Waking Up White that I've read, and then a really good book called Plantation Jesus, which I don't know if you've read that one, but it is all about.
I haven't read it.
Oh, it's so good. But like in a horrible way. Like it's very well written, but it's very challenging to someone like myself that is white and a Christian, because it talks all about how white Christianity was used by white people in the U.S. to perpetuate racism, and it's very disturbing, the intentionality of it, and the continued nature of it. But I think it's very important read for anybody to read up on. So it's something that I've been thinking about. I've been informing myself, and then also, part of it is that I have a very, very close connection to Latino culture in general. Like my husband is from Mexico. I have my church family. Most of the people in my church family are from Latin America, and a lot of my friends, and just like, this is kind of part of my life too. Like I kind of sometimes feel like I'm Latina at heart, where I know I can't be, like it's not in my DNA, but like sometimes like I wish I could be, but I know that's not really how it works. So, I just kind of feel it. It just feels like part of who I am a little bit. But at the same time, I know I'm an outsider looking in, which is why this time, I got sensitivity readers, and they're currently looking at my book. And sensitivity readers, for those who don't know, are like people that are from the culture of what you are writing. If you are a white person writing a different culture, or if you're a person of color writing of a different culture other than your own, it's someone that's from the culture of the person that you're writing. So like, for example, I have people from like El Salvador and Mexico in my book. So the people, I have like 4 sensitivity readers, and they all have Latino origins, and they're reading my book, and they're going to give me feedback about anything that might be unintentionally like offensive, or isn't authentic, or doesn't kind of feel right for the book. And so that's something that that's actively happening. That's in process right now, and they're supposed to be getting that stuff back to me on the 10th of this month. So we shall see. I've already been getting some feedback about my Spanish, which I always mess up, like these little words. Like I always miss off, like I always put like a lay instead of a low, or I add a te where there's not supposed to be a te. So they're catching all those things. There's just little things where it's my second language, and
right.
Kind of like, when you talk to someone who's speaking English as a second language, like it's like you can tell, because there's like a couple like little things that are not quite right, which when you're talking is cute, but when you're writing a book is less cute.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like it made me think of, I have several friends that are from different countries. I have some that have been in the United States for a long time and have spoken English for a long time, but it's their second language. And
right.
So even if they're like really fluent and everything, there might be like certain idioms or other like little things that might, it may take a very, very long time, and it may be something that might never completely get.
Right, exactly.
So, I'm sure that that's probably what you encountered with using Spanish.
Right. And so, if I think about just language-wise, then maybe I'm doing that just in the non-dialogue as well. So that's one of the things that, unintentionally, like, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And so that's what sensitivity readers are for. So I'm really trying to make sure I don't get in the way of this book.
Mm-hmm. Sounds really thoughtful. I kind of wonder myself, like, how much, as far as like the media, do they employ sensitivity readers? Just because sometimes when I do read things or consume like entertainment, that one culture is writing about a different culture. And, sometimes I think it's very hard to not employ your own background and your own experiences into things. And you kind of feel like, this is like, something isn't quite right about this, But I will say,
I think it's a problem. Yeah. I think it's a problem because like, there's a big push to add more diverse characters or have more diverse fiction. And so what's happening is that a lot of my people, the white people, they are like, oh, I want to write a diverse book. So I'm just going to, take this book that I already wrote and then change their skin color. And then, that's not quite how it works there, people. You can't just like randomly change someone's skin color. It's like there's a lot of cultural things that go along with it too. It's not just about putting a diverse person in your book. And they're not just there just like as a little poster. It's supposed to be like real authentic people. That's why they want diverse things, so that people that are from diverse cultures feel like, hey, there's books about me and so I think it's something that we have to be very cautious about, especially I'm just talking for people that are whiter need to be very cautious about, because I think it's dangerous territory.
Yeah, I think it's it definitely is something that artists want to kind of be aware of when writing about or making some kind of work about someone of the culture that they're not necessarily a part of. When I read your previous book, Vivir el Dream, I found that, I'm probably not the best person to judge just because I'm not from Latino culture, but it did feel like reading a lot of the details in the book and a lot of what was in the book, it really felt like I could kind of empathize with the characters. When you wrote Finding Amor, have you kind of maybe done some of that as well, as far as building characters that people can relate to, or in a way that maybe they can empathize even if they're not necessarily from that culture?
Yeah, I think so. That's the feedback I've been getting so far, is that people are enjoying it and they're feeling very enthralled by the story. So that's good. It's kind of still out with beta readers and sensitivity readers, so I'll know more soon. But for the handful of people that have read it so far, they're feeling like they don't want to put it down. One lady was like, I'm not getting enough sleep because I can't put your book down. So that's always something good to hear as a writer. And I think that as a counselor, because that's my job, I'm a therapist, mental health and substance abuse counselor, I kind of inherently write in a way that makes people empathize, because that's one of my gifts is empathy, and so otherwise I'd be a really crappy counselor. And so for me, I that's something, and that's one of the purposes, I think, of my book too, is part of it is I want people that are undocumented that maybe don't have a voice, or people that are reading Christian fiction that are Latino and don't see anyone like them in books. I want them to see strong, authentic characters that are portraying their culture, and at the same time, I want Christians to be opening their eyes to the things that are going on in the world, and to have heart and compassion, which is, I think, one thing that's seriously missing right now is compassion and empathy for others. And I think compassion and empathy and love, all those things, which is, a lot of that's is kind of almost the same thing, but having compassion, empathy, and love can, I think, solve a host of the world's issues and really get people to get to know each other. And I think, that's part of my book. And I have this blog that I help with. It's called Diversity Between the Pages, and it's all about diverse Christian fiction. And one of the people on there, I can't remember who it was, told me that there was a study that showed that when people read books, they are able to be more empathetic about someone that's different than them, because they get into reading the character and they're able to put themselves in the shoes of that character. And so that was very encouraging to me, and something that I had actually heard people say when they're reading Vivir el Dream, that people could really were feeling for the characters, and they really didn't know that was going on, and kind of got them a different perspective. And I'm hoping people will have a similar experience with Finding Amor, with Emmanuel, who's so small, and a lot of the kids that are, in the cages and different things that are going on right now, those are about Emmanuel's age. And at the same time, I think that people are blinding themselves, the people that are against it are blinding themselves to the fact that those aren't just pictures on the screen. Those are actual children, somebody's child that kid has a mom, and that mom is right there, in a different cage or in a different facility, upset and wanting to be with the family. And so I think that it's a very important thing for people to have empathy.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like, it's so interesting, like, because I felt like the timing of Finding Amor coming out, I guess for lack of a better word, pretty impeccable, like, considering everything that's going on as far as the Trump administration separating children from families at the U.S.-Mexico border, children being put in cages, being put in these, like, facilities. If, after reading Finding Amor, readers come away feeling more empathetic towards refugees from El Salvador and other places in Central and South America, what would you say is kind of the next step? So, like, they empathize, okay, I feel bad, or this is horrible. What next?
What do I do? Yeah. So what I've done, what I'm going to be doing, and what I've done for Viviana's Dream also, is at the end of the book, I put resources. So places where you can it's called Get Active, Get Involved, Get Active. I can't remember exactly the phrase, but it gives people actual resources and places they can go and things they can do to be involved in helping the immigrant population and helping and making sure the right thing is happening in this country. But off the top of my head, I would say there's always the ACLU, and then if there's, like, for example, in Virginia, we have Virginia Organizing. So it's kind of a grassroots thing that's going on. So I would say, like, some grassroots places and some of the bigger agencies are tackling some of these things, and you can get involved. Right now with the children, I think for a while, like, when it wasn't kids, people could just kind of ignore it, and they could just pretend it wasn't happening. But then, you get the mama bear thing happening, and so, like, just while they could ignore it for a bit, I think, like, when there were pictures of actual children in cages and being ripped from parents' arms, that did a lot of the women in America, I think, and really riled people up because that's been happening, but I think that there were no images of it, and it wasn't happening as frequently, and I think there's a lot of energy against that. At the same time, I know that people kind of, with social media and all that stuff, once there's another story, they go on to the next thing, so I don't want people to forget that this is still happening, And so I think that's one of the things with getting involved in your local community, and also sometimes bigger organizations. There's another organization called Coming to the Table. Faith in Action is another one. And so there's a lot of different organizations depending on what you're interested in helping with. And I don't think it takes too much Google searching to find a place near you to help and be active with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's also, especially like being able to also find time to check out events as well. Sometimes like when you're going to these events, like when I went to the Families Belong Together event back in June, and a lot of both local and national organizations that are trying to do things to help these refugees that are seeking asylum, as well as undocumented immigrants and other immigrants that are here in the United States. A lot of those groups were there, and I was able to kind of touch base with some of those. You know, when those kinds of events come out, I think it's definitely important to check them out as a first step to being able to kind of get connected and find ways that you can get involved further.
Yeah, and I think too, just being loving to other people is just always the next step. I think when you change your heart and you change the way you look at people and the way you interact with people and the way you act towards people, your behavior towards people, that does a lot in itself. And I think that can have a ripple effect. Right now it's pretty divisive, but, see something, say something. If one of your friends or your family is misinformed on something, it's okay to speak up and talk. Just make sure, take a deep breath before you roll into it. Because, I don't know, for me, I get like, I start to get a little Jersey. And it's hard for me to calm myself down. So, but it's important to, and to read books and to watch movies and learn more is always good too. Put a plug out for a really good memoir by Reyna Grande called The Distance Between Us. So if you're interested in border stories and why people come, I think that was really good. That was very well written. She's awesome. kind of like my hero, but, side note.
Awesome. I know that you had maybe a short sneak preview of Finding Amor that might get readers enticed in buying the book once it's out. You want to share?
I do. Yes, I do. So I have just the first scene with Emmanuel here, and I am just going to read that first scene, and feel free to enjoy it. Emmanuel Martinez trembled beneath his ragged, dirt-stained clothing. The bus bouncing hard on the rutted gravel road, combined with the increasingly angry screams in the distance, did nothing to calm his nerves. He had never felt so scared and alone in his life. Weeks of traveling with strangers, following his coyote through 3 countries, staying in abandoned buildings, riding atop moving trains, and risking his life meant nothing now, worthless, erased as if they'd never happened. The rest of his life, all 8 years of it, hadn't been easy, but this was by far the worst. La Migra caught him and other kids at the border, crossing into Texas, so close to freedom they had actually touched it. His left hand had grabbed a blade of American grass before the uniformed man picked him up and carried him away. Red-faced Americans rhythmically pumped flags and signs in the air. Their voices, filled with hatred and fire, reverberated through the thin windows of the bus, where he sat on a worn seat, pieces of orangish-yellow fluff poking through holes in the dark green leather. The driver shifted to a lower gear and slowed down. Emmanuel twirled the wilted green strand of American grass between his index finger and thumb, trying to drown out the world around him, but it was impossible. Their voices echoed so loud he could feel them pass through his body. A window shattered. Frightened screams erupted around him. Emmanuel dropped to the floor, grabbing the little boy Homer across the aisle and shielding him from any more broken glass. The boy was maybe 3 or 4 years old and was sobbing uncontrollably and smelled like caca. 2 hours ago, Emmanuel had sat in a dirty, fenced-in holding cell with hundreds of other illegals. He'd watched La Migra rip Homer out of his mother's arms. They dragged her and the other mothers and fathers into separate cages, screaming, their arms outstretched, reaching for their bawling children. Then they'd rounded up the shaking, weeping children and bust them out of their parents' lives.
Oh, wow. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to the book. Yeah. So, when can readers expect to see Finding Amor release?
Okay, I am hoping to get it up for pre-order. I'm hoping to get it up by the 5th, and I'm hoping that it will be published and ready to purchase and like to have in your hand, either in your Kindle or in a lovely paperback form. Hopefully that will be ready end of August or beginning of September.
Okay. But you said that pre-orders will be available starting around the 5th?
The 5th of August, that's right.
5th of August. Okay. All right. So by the time that you hear this interview, the pre-orders will be available. And where can readers go to pre-order?
It'll be available for pre-order on Kindle, so on Amazon.com. And then it'll be available for purchase at either the end of August or beginning of September on Amazon and also on iBooks.
Okay, awesome. That sounds great. You definitely want to get a copy of Finding Amor. A couple quick things. So do you have any plans for what's going to happen next for you after the book is released? So like whether it's any new projects or promoting this book or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have several live events, in-person events lined up to promote my book. I've been invited to a couple churches and to local universities. And also I will be working on the second project of this, the second book in the series, which is Finding Seguridad. The third one will be Finding Paz. And also this is kind of exciting. I'm just going to throw that out there. This is kind of fresh news right here for you. I'm actually in a little group that we just recently started, which is for writers of Latino Christian fiction. And we are putting together a Christmas novella set that will be available in November. So keep an eye out for that. The working title is A Merry Navidad. So hopefully that will be out in the beginning of November. So there's going to be, I think there's 6 authors contributing to that. So I'm going to be writing about some of my characters from Finding Amor. There's a character named Kylie, and her mother, Nancy. And so they're going to be, it's going to be about them. And, and so then I've got some other projects lined up too. I've been considering also writing like a short story entitled Caged for Christmas about Homer, so the little boy that I wrote about, and his family, his mom. But I'm not sure yet. So I'm kind of pausing and praying on that. Starting this week, I'm going to be starting working on that novella. And after NaNoWriMo, I will be writing book 2 of the Buscando Home series.
Oh, nice. So where's the best place for people to find out about those?
I would say the best place is like either my Facebook author page or maybe Instagram, or even better, I will have all my information on my newsletter as well. So for people that are interested in kind of finding out more about me and my books, they can sign up for my email newsletter. Another place people can go is to my Readers and Dreamers Facebook group, which is where they can find out information about upcoming events with me, but also learn about Latino fiction in general and get to know each other. And it's actually a really great spot. We've been having fun on there.
Right. Awesome. So guys, definitely read Finding Amor. That's Finding Amor, A-M-O-R. I definitely recommend you pre-order this book. Thank you so much, Allison, for coming back on the Potstirrer Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. I think you were my first foray into public speaking, and so I've done a lot of things since then, so I'm really thankful for you and for your program. So keep doing awesome work.
Oh, thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed the interview with Allison K. Garcia. Follow her on Twitter at @TheWriter, the letter A, the writer, and on Instagram at Allison K. Garcia Author. I will have links to Allison's Facebook pages and a link to sign up for her newsletter in the show notes. Her new book, Finding Amor, has open pre-orders as of this podcast release date of August 12th on Amazon.com. I've ordered my copy, and I encourage you to order it today. Speaking of new releases, one of our awesome Flying Machine Network podcasts, Falling in Love Montage, is now back after being on break last month. Falling in Love Montage is a chick flick podcast where two sisters, Helen and Valerie, talk romantic movies and sometimes have some fun guests to join them. I really enjoy their podcast, and it's a great reprieve from the world of politics. The newest episode is about the rom-com Mamma Mia, and they're joined by Nick from Stranger Still. So get your dance on and check that out. Falling in Love Montage is on iTunes, Stitcher, and on most podcatchers. Also, check out their website at fallinginlovemontage.com. Thank you so much for listening to Potstirrer Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or on your favorite podcatcher. Go to potstirrerpodcast.com/download, and links are right there. If you subscribe, you can get new episodes once they're released, so there's no lag time. Be sure to tell your friends about the show, and if you have anything you'd like to tweet at me, tweet me at PotstirrerCast. I'm Jaye Poole. Let's fight for America's future, because freedom is not free.
I give you the incredible flying machine.